Hello, and thank you for being here. My name is JC. I'm your host for Context, a show that brings you different topics and a range of ideas regarding how you can be living life. Specifically, in this case today, we're going to be talking about something a little lighthearted. With me today are some local gentlemen. I have Tom. Say hello.
Hello.
And then I also have Eric. Say hello.
Hello.
And they're your local friendly neighborhood fantasy football players. Tom is a commissioner and Eric is a lifelong student and player. And we'll be talking about its origins and also giving you some resources on how you can be a part of it if it intrigues you or it piques your interest. So, Tom, if I recall correctly, fantasy football is a part of a genre of fantasy sports. What are its origins? If you could give us a little bit about that.
So once long ago, a screenwriter by the name of Matthew Berry took a bunch of peyote, and 3 days later when he came out of it, he came up with two things: the script to Crocodile Dundee in Los Angeles and the concept of fantasy sports.
That can't be right, is it?
No, it's
Okay.
not. Fantasy football actually started as early as 1960s in Oakland. It doesn't really resemble the fantasy sports we think of today. They actually considered just points, like however many points a team scored is how many points you got. The more modern version of fantasy sports where individual stats contributed to the points being scored for your team, that started around the 1980s. Some reporters in Manhattan would get together frequently at a French restaurant, and they decided to roll their own league to kind of draft their own players and use the stats to determine, what team of players was doing better. And the league was named after the restaurant they were in. That's why it's called the Rotisserie League. Back then, everything was done manually. There was no internet, so they would look at the box scores the following day, and they would have a commissioner physically mail sometimes the results to players, and then the players would mail their lineup changes and everything to the commissioner.
So I remember in the 90s, early 90s, I had a colleague when I was working at a local theater here in the area, and his thing was fantasy baseball, looking at those box scores the next day. So how did we get from there to fantasy football? Or was fantasy football kind of at the inception of fantasy sports the same thing?
I'm sure there was fantasy football going on around the same time or soon after, but it didn't really take off the way it is now until the age of the internet. The internet is what's caused the boom in fantasy sports. The ease in which you can track your players, track your teams. Entire sites have been devoted to fantasy sports and fantasy football in particular. It's easy to research now.
So how did you become this lofty commissioner, a man who decides the fates of players?
I was looking for something to do with my dad. He was in his 60s at the time, I think. And, we didn't really get along a whole lot. So I figured we shared a love of sports. I figured fantasy sports might be something that would, give us something to talk about on a weekly basis.
A form of therapy, I guess?
Yeah, something like that. So I got
Nice.
together with him and my brother and some friends, you included, and Eric here. And we formed a fantasy league, and we had it going for over a decade until my dad passed. We kind of fell apart as a league after that, but I still do it every year. With different leagues.
And you have a really broad, you have some breadth to your knowledge as well, because I know that when I ever have a question, I go to you and I'm asking questions about this or that, even if it's just an ancillary question, because I really, outside of our league, I don't play. What about you, Eric? When did you get involved, and did you play it before the league when we were playing?
No, actually, I kind of barely vaguely knew about the rotisserie sports that Tom was talking about earlier, but I didn't really know exactly what it was. But I think Tom was the first person who invited me into an actual fantasy league. And from that point, I think I'd played in every year when the league was up. There were a couple of other leagues I'd been in with like work. When I was working at Rayleigh's, they had a group that played yearly, but nothing as involved or as committed as Tom's. I mean, we spent some of those draft periods got pretty intense.
Yeah, and a lot of people, the draft is the best part. And when you're drafting
Agreed.
a person especially, it's probably the most fun that you'll have in fantasy that year.
Agreed, because there's a lot of stuff talking around that table, too.
Yes, and not to say that the rest of the year isn't that fun, but there's something special about a fantasy draft, especially when you're together with your friends and you're trash talking each other.
What would you say are the key skills that if you're going to be involved in fantasy football, league, because that's what we're talking about specifically today, excluding the other sports, what are the key skills that you need to really manage that team and do it right?
To manage the team or to draft?
Well, let's do both. Draft and then manage.
You need access to NFL Red Zone because you don't want to sit there and try and watch every game that comes on every Sunday.
Yeah, Red Zone channel is like that. That is probably a big game changer in fantasy. I don't know what the stats are, but I imagine that contributed greatly to the rise of fantasy when it came out, or its popularity is directly attributed to fantasy.
But what if you're a wet blanket like me and you don't like necessarily watching football, or as a lot of people nowadays say, they just don't have the time to devote to that much football?
If you don't like football, why are you playing fantasy football, Julio?
Because I enjoy it playing with my friends.
Well, that's good. I mean, fantasy, you don't actually have to watch the games to play. It's more fun. It's definitely more fun if you're watching to see how your players are doing. What was the question again?
So what are the key skills that I would use for drafting and for managing my team? So NFL Red Zone is a great resource for me.
That's a great resource to see how players are doing, the players you might want to grab like on the waiver wire or something. Before the draft, you're not going to have access to that, obviously. There's a Game Pass if you really want to see the preseason games. But really just the ability to do research online in this day and age. There's so much information out there.
Okay.
Part of the skill is just figuring out separate the wheat from the chaff. Everyone and their uncle has an opinion. Like, I have an opinion on things, and I am probably horrible at it. And a lot of fantasy experts are, in many cases, no better than a coin flip. There's a site called Fantasy Pros that actually ranks the experts and their accuracy, and you'd be surprised how inaccurate most of these guys are. The top guys are in the 60% range, something like that.
So I think I figured out when I had my best season in the league, I figured out that it was just mostly math. That's kind of what worked for me. What about you, Eric? What's worked best for you?
Well, you're not going to go in there and try and cover everything, right? You have, at a glance, you have your quarterbacks, your receivers, your running backs, tight end and defense. I think there's kicker as well, but you don't really have to spend a lot of effort on trying to get a kicker for your team. But the key thing is that you have to decide, okay, am I going to focus on wide receivers? Am I going to focus on running backs? Am I going to focus on quarterbacks? There's some question about, is defense more important to me? I mean, you really want to pick one of those 3 or 4 things and then draft highly for it. But then if you actually watch football, you would kind of have an idea of which of those things you should probably weight less or more.
So one of the things I figured out also was that quarterbacks, right? Those are one of the key players that you really want to make sure you do well on as far as your draft. Yes or no?
I would tend to disagree. The prevailing consensus these days is that you can probably wait in most scenarios, in most leagues, you can wait on a quarterback. Because the people that you're going to draft, the first few quarterbacks, they're going to go early, which means you're not going to get that extra wide receiver or extra running back that you probably could use more of. And it's the quarterback play. The quarterbacks, they tend to cluster. Like, there's always a number 1 quarterback and there's always a number 10 quarterback, but the difference between the two from year to year is not as great as the difference between the number 1 running back and the number 10 running back. So it's better for you to get those elite running backs and those elite wide receivers rather than trying to get an elite quarterback who may or may not play up to what you're paying for them.
Got it. So I do recall that one of my deficits was running backs. I had like 1 or 2, and then that was it. And then one of the other players in the league had a really good roster of like 4 or 5 that were relatively ranked, and they were outperforming me definitely on a regular basis. What about you, Eric? What do you focus on?
Kind of dovetailing on what Tom was kind of alluding to, reliability, right? Certain quarterbacks are more injury prone. That's true for other players too, like receivers and running backs. And if you've watched enough of the games, like over the past couple of seasons, you kind of have a feel for who you should and probably should stay away from. I think I rate quarterbacks a little bit higher than Tom because I've gotten burned by waiting too long. But I'm always finding that there are never enough running backs and receivers to go around because in your leagues, those were drafted first, almost exclusively.
Yeah, and it depends on the time of the league, like I said. So there are some leagues where you play more than one quarterback. In those leagues, quarterbacks are more of a premium, so you do want to draft earlier. But I try not to grab the elite guys anymore.
Okay, so switching a little bit of the gears, what kinds of, so if I don't have a bunch of friends and I don't have a friendly neighborhood commissioner or players, where can I join a league, or how could I join to have some fun enjoying my hobby?
So there's a couple of options here. It depends on how much you're willing to pay. If you're looking for a free experience, you can go and find a public league on ESPN, on NFL.com, on CBS Sports. There's a ton of sites out there that host fantasy leagues. They're completely free. They're completely random strangers. If you don't know anybody, you can just join a league that already has players waiting for their league to fill up, or you can start a new league and have strangers fill up the league for you. You will get what you pay for. Most of the time, half the players in that league will maybe do the draft and then not play any week, so you'll have some dead teams. So keep that in mind if you're going to go that route. I found more success with leagues where you have to actually pay to get in, and those you pay a certain amount, $10, $50, whatever it is. At the end of the year, the winner gets a cut of what the total number of fees were. Usually, the site takes a little bit off the top because that's how they run. Okay. And in those cases, the players are more likely to stick it out, and you're going to have a more competitive, more fun experience, in my opinion.
What do you use on a regular basis? Give me your top two, because I think you're part of like 6 or 7 or something like that.
As far as leagues go?
Yeah, as leagues go, yeah.
Well, I use I play in a couple of different leagues. I have what's called an Empire League, which is part of my fantasy leagues. I think it's been absorbed by the same group that does Fanball, Sports Hub Network, I think. And they also do these guillotine leagues, which I've been playing this year, and those are actually really fun. I can get into that in a little bit.
Now, that's guillotine or guillotine?
Guillotine, like the French off with their head.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So why is it called a guillotine?
Okay, so we'll get into that now.
Sure.
So a normal fantasy league, we'll just go into different fantasy types. So a normal fantasy league is a redraft league. You start the year, you draft your players, you week to week manage your rosters. Some leagues you'll just total up your points by the end of the year, and no most points wins. Other leagues you're playing every week against someone else, and your total for the week versus their total for the week, and then you have a win-loss record, that kind of thing. At the end of the year, you're done. There's a champion. You go on. Next year, you do the whole thing over again. Dynasty leagues or keeper leagues, you keep one or all of your players from year to year for some continuity. So if you draft a really good player, like in the late rounds, you don't have to worry about them now being unavailable when you draft again in the next year.
So would that mimic kind of like really being a manager of a team where you could have like someone who's fresh out of college and then they mature and then they actually become a decent, if not an elite player over time?
Yes, dynasty leagues are great for that. You get a sense of ownership of the players, of your team. Year to year, you're pretty much drafting the rookies after the first draft. And
nice.
You can see them grow, and you have to figure out when to cut them, that kind of thing. Empire League, which is what I have, is similar. But it's a dynasty league with an end date. Basically, every year it's a paid league, so every year half the winnings gets put into an Empire pot, and then whenever a team wins 2 years in a row, they win the entire pot, and then the league ends. So it's a dynasty league with an end date. So having said all that, a guillotine league it's like a season-long league, where there's 17 teams. And every week, the lowest scoring team is chopped. It's eliminated from the league, and all of their players become free agents available for anyone else to pick up.
Kind of like English football, yeah? Where the team gets sent to the lower rungs of the second league? Yes? No?
If English football, the lowest scoring team was
relegated, I guess.
Annihilated or something, yes.
Yeah. All right.
But yeah, I mean, the players don't just get the players stay in the pool so other teams can get it. They're not going to just disappear.
Right. So, Eric, what kind of websites do you use, if any at all?
Not as many as Tom. I end up using the NFL.com or the ESPN.com sites.
Okay.
Those are good ones.
the leagues I've participated in outside of Tom's league have basically been like NFL or ESPN managed leagues where, as Tom was describing, you have a bunch of random people get together in a league, then you draft, then you play. One thing I did want to note that we kind of haven't covered yet is that you don't actually have to pick teams from week to week in terms of selecting players in order to play. I think you'll probably touch on this later, but like, for instance, basketball, it's possible to just pick, like, say, during the March Madness college basketball tournament.
Yeah.
You can just pick your winners and losers, and then however close you are to what actually happens in reality determines if you proceed. But you're still in a fantasy kind of event, right?
Yeah.
So you don't actually have to go through and pick, well, who's going to start as point guard, who's going to start as center, who's going to start as forward, etc. You can just pick your teams and go.
Okay. Wow. What would you say is the more challenging aspect of something like that?
If you're just picking teams and go, you kind of have to rely on how confident you are that the team is going to win, right? I mean, like, especially, again, this is probably something I'll touch on later, but like in the March Madness tournament, there's always going to be an upset on some of those levels, right? In football, it tends not to be the case. If the Jets go up against the Bengals, then you know that one of those is going to win. Tom would probably say the Jets is not going to be that team. But
I can pretty easily say the Jets will never be that team.
But like in college
You're the
basketball,
weird one for liking them.
If UOP gets into the tournament and they go up against somebody like Xavier in like the starting rounds, there is a chance that Xavier could get upset by UOP because UOP is going to be, right, tiny college in Stockton. They're going to be out of their skins in terms of we're really excited for this tournament.
Absolutely. So let me go ahead and stop us there for a moment, and let's go ahead and get some thank yous out there to the community. So bear with us as we go ahead and hit some of our PSAs.
Oh, baby, when you walk that way, I get a sweet, funny feeling that won't go away. Oh, baby, when you smile that smile, you make me want to...
Richard Alcala and Teatro Nagual are proud to present Burnt Tortillas, the Bishop Gallegos story. Bishop Gallegos was a beloved figure in Sacramento history, and on March 14th and 15th, you can experience this celebration of his life and legacy. Playing at the Sierra 2 Performing Arts Center, you can find us on brown paper tickets by searching Burnt Tortillas. Like Teatro Nagual on Facebook and follow us as we prepare to bring this rich history to Sacramento audiences. Call 916-549-3341 for more details, and we will see you on March 14th and 15th. Gracias.
So we want to thank you again for joining us here on KUBU. You're listening to KUBU 96.5 FM, the voice of Sacramento. Besides being heard on the radio, cable, TV, or computer, our programs can be heard in an even easier way now. There's a KUBU app for your phone. Download KUBU 96.5 FM from the Apple Store for your iPhone and iPad, or from Google Play Store for Android and other phones. It's free. Free. What else do you want? Once the KUBU 96.5 FM app is installed, it's just one button to listen to KUBU. You can listen to context from the app from anywhere in the world. Easier than ever to take KUBU with you. And thanks for listening to the voice of Sacramento, KUBU Sacramento.
United Latinos will host its Voter Education Forum on February 8th, 2020, from 10 a.m. to 12:30 at St. Philomene Catholic Church in Sacramento County. We're going to invite candidates running for Supervisory District Council 3, City Council District 2 and 4, and Twin Rivers School District 7. For questions, call us at 510-559-0310 or go to our website at www.unitedlatinos.org.
How sweet this life. This is life. Oh, darling, you. Don't you even wanna try? I ain't a bad guy.
All right, and we're back. Thank you for that, and thank you for listening to KUBU. So, gentlemen, as we were going through, some of the depictions in popular media kind of have this set up for like it's for hardcore sports fans and football players. I'm thinking of the league specifically. Yes, you guys watched?
Oh, the league? Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked it. I liked it a lot.
Yeah. Were there any seminal lessons to be learned from the league? I mean, I kind of learned not to mimic their behavior because it was some pretty raunchy stuff.
Yeah, you probably would get fired from your job if you did half of what they did. That's not to emulate them. But honestly,
I think one of them did get fired.
The trash talking was always something I wanted to aspire to in my league, although I didn't have willing participants most of the time. Another lesson is that there is always going to be a taco. No matter what league you're in, there's always going to be a taco.
And who was that for us?
That was Aaron. Hi, Aaron.
Hi, Aaron.
Yeah, he won the league the last year that we were a league, and I don't think he played a single roster. His roster was the default from day one. He didn't even make half the draft, and so I helped draft his team, and I did too good a job. And
was it Aaron or Sam that went in and rolled dice basically to pick every player? Or I think she said their name sounded good. Was that?
Sam wanted to prove that it was more luck than skill. And so she did some randomness to determine players she was drafting, and she didn't do very well. So
yeah,
at least in that respect, I felt a little bit vindicated. There's a lot of luck involved. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of luck involved in fantasy football. But there is some skill. It's not completely random.
I remember her. Yeah, that was the whole thesis she had was that it was random and that it would be just as good. Or that she would at least have ranked higher than she did. But she actually wound up at the bottom.
She won the Golden Turkey that year.
Oh, amazing. And by the way, I still have my Golden Turkey. I really love that award.
You were a repeat winner, weren't you?
No, I only had it once, actually.
Oh, that might have been Curvin.
Yeah, it was somebody else. Although, Eric, I think you won, once or twice, right?
I won once, I believe, yeah.
Okay. And then, Tom, did you rig it? Did you win?
The league? I won them 2 or 3 times.
Well, of course, you're the commissioner, so you had a fix. You know,
exactly,
as a president would say, fake news, right?
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, we're quickly running out of time here. So tell me a little bit, because I know, Tom, specifically, you're working on a basketball fantasy website or something like that.
I am. It's hoop-ball.com. It's a site that was created by Aaron Brewski. Some of you guys might know him if you follow local sports. He covered a lot of the Kings relocation saga back in the day. Okay. He used to be a writer for the NBC Sports Online, and now he has Hoop-Ball.
Nice. And Eric, what would you say is one of your seminal memories of the league that we had together?
Just how, if you can draft that one player each, that would kind of, if you found the breakout star that year, like I got Cam Newton, and I think it was either in his first or second year in the league, and I just basically ended up riding him to either victory or second place. I'm not sure how that happened, but it's like one player can make all the difference.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I remember that too. I think I had 1 year, again, this is how bad my football knowledge is. It was one of those elites about a couple of years ago, and I want to say it was Elway or maybe not.
It was not Elway.
Okay, well, whatever. It was a quarterback, and he did all right. So
yeah, I think you had Brady 1 year.
Brady, that was it.
You did pretty well.
Yes, that was it. Yeah, I think and that's why I was really livid at Aaron. Hi, Aaron. Say hi, Aaron. Hi, Aaron.
Yep.
For winning that 1 year, because I thought I actually had a chance at winning, and he kind of like snatched it away from me. Any last thoughts, gentlemen?
Have fun. This is above all a game. It is meant to be played with friends. You can play it for money against total strangers, and a lot of people do, and a lot of people invest a ton of money doing this for a living.
That's right. There's professionals.
There are professionals that do daily fantasy and all that other stuff.
Have tools as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
You don't need to do that to have fun playing fantasy. In fact, it probably takes away from it a little bit.
Last thoughts, Eric.
Following on from what Tom is saying, just go to NFL.com and pick one of their managed leagues and just have a blast. Just pick the team you like, pick the players you like, and play.
Nice. So I think we'll make sure that we have on the show notes, once we get this up on our Twitter page and Facebook page, that's Context, the radio show. And we're going to have a couple of links. I can't undersell it that Wikipedia is a great resource. It'll give you the full knowledge and breadth of where it's coming from, but always look at the references, because that's where you're going to find the really good knowledge, and figure out from there what you're going to do. So let me go ahead and get us started. And I'm going to say thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. You have yourself a great day. Yeah, that's true. KUBU.